Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started on the homeschool and college admissions webinar. Um, I'm sure people will continue to join as we kind of go through here, but just want to be very respectful of time. So let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see the presentation. And then we can get started. Okay, so as I said, we are hosting the homeschool and college admissions webinar. Just with all of the coronavirus and COVID-19 and schooling at home, there's just been a lot of conversations about this as to whether or not this is a good option for families moving forward. So definitely wanted to be here for you guys, be a resource, and hopefully be able to help steer you toward making the best decision regarding homeschool. Before we get started, let me go ahead and share a little bit about me with you. So again, my name is Kortney Greene. I've been in the realm or the world of education for about 18 years. 14 of those years have been specifically dealing with college admissions, college counseling, things of that nature. And then spent about 3 years specifically in educational consulting. I did join the Firat team, or Firat family as I like to say, in July of 2019. I serve the Phoenix metro area, which means Phoenix, Scottsdale, Gilbert, Chandler, sort of that area. Over my career, I've logged more than 10,000 hours of consulting for college admissions specifically. In that time, I've had 3 students accepted to Ivy League schools. I've visited over 20 colleges, which quite frankly is about the equivalent of sticking my pinky toe in the college world, in the sense that there are over 4,000 degree granting accredited universities across the nation. So I look forward to, once coronavirus is over and kind of things go back to some sort of normalcy, to be able to visit more colleges. In addition to that, and during my time, my students have earned about $10 million in total merit-based aid. And then one other point I'd like to share that isn't on here, but it's relevant to what we're talking about today, is I am currently a working mom with a homeschool student. So some of what you're going to hear today is just based on personal research that I've done, some experiences. We have a lot of family and friends who are actually homeschooling, and so it's just it's an important topic to me. It's near and dear to my heart. So hopefully this is beneficial for you guys as well. So today we are going to briefly talk about how COVID-19 has impacted education nationally. A lot of our, just the impacts across the nation for our schools. We're actually going to define homeschooling. I think that is the best place to start, is being able to identify what it actually looks like to homeschool and what it means. Then we'll talk through whether or not homeschooling is the right fit for you and your family, and just some ways to kind of decipher that. With any decision, as we all know, there are pros and cons, and so I'll highlight a few of those pros and cons, just specifically related to homeschooling. And then really, I hope to spend a majority, kind of the bulk of our time, talking about the impact of homeschooling on college admissions. Again, that's super important to me. I've dedicated a lot of my career to college admissions, and so connecting the two is exciting. And then we'll talk through next step and some resources that will hopefully, again, set you all on the right path for making this decision. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Coronavirus, or COVID-19, has really impacted our educational system across the nation. Schools are closed, there are empty classrooms, there are empty buildings. Parents have been forced to school at home, educate at home. Likely many families, actually many parents doing it while also maintaining a full-time job. These are very, very challenging times for families. A lot of students have been forced to utilize an online format for this now new home educated system. And that in and of itself presents challenges and has presented challenges, you know, just in terms of having the right equipment, you know, laptops or iPads or whatever, and making sure that the information that teachers and schools are sharing with families, you know, are compatible with the equipment, right? There's just been a lot of challenges around that. This whole new world has brought a lot of awareness of the curriculum for parents. Maybe previously to this, you were aware of maybe a large project that your child was doing, or you know, maybe a literature book they were reading, or maybe even over the dinner table having a discussion about, you know, what they were learning in world history or something like that. However, now parents are intimately involved with the curriculum, even for high school students. And so being familiar with what your students are learning and gaining knowledge in is fantastic, I think, but it also opens the door to being aware of what some student needs might be. For example, maybe you are watching your child struggle to navigate the online curriculum. That's a reality for some parents. It's not always easy, especially when you take a previously, you know, brick and mortar curriculum and now you transfer it to online. So there could be some challenges there. Maybe you are seeing that your student is really struggling with time management. Their schedule has been completely changed from what they knew, you know, a month and a half ago until today. And so maybe that's a need that you're seeing. Or maybe you're seeing that your student is actually excelling in this format, and they are grasping material more quickly, and they are moving forward through the materials provided by the teacher faster than you anticipated, and you find yourself, you know, finding resources or researching and more information to kind of fill that knowledge gap for your student. None of which are bad things, but these might all be new awarenesses or new realities for families during the midst of the COVID-19. And basically everyone is doing school at home. So managing that and, you know, working through that is important and can be challenging. Prior to coronavirus or COVID-19, there were about 1.7 million school-age children that were homeschooled. That was about 3% of the population. And now, obviously, it's higher since a lot of people are doing school at home, which has, again, led families to this point of making some decisions, deciding if educating at home should actually continue once schools reopen. I think there still are a lot of questions surrounding schools reopening in the fall. And so maybe parents are looking to kind of get ahead of that curve and make some decisions prior to any final determinations by school districts or states. So again, the goal is to just help you focus on making the right decision for your family. Before we can even get to making the decision, though, it's really important that you are aware of the different types of, the different definitions of homeschooling. So just again, in my personal experience and researching and all of that, I have found that there are far more than 3 options. There are many, many options, but I really have seen that most of the options fit into one of these 3 buckets, we'll call them. And so identifying the best bucket for your family and then choosing from there is the best way to go and kind of my recommendation. So we'll start with the first one, traditional. It's also known as conventional, it's known as formal. It's known as school at home. There are a lot of different names kind of associated with this one. It is frankly the most common form of homeschooling that is seen. This form, this mode, is ideal for those who really don't want to reinvent the wheel of education. They really want their student to sort of stay on the same trajectory that they've seen over the last several years, but they just want to do it in a at-home format. It can be done in an online option. It can be done in a book format. What's really beneficial about this mode is that students do have the option to work independently, or there are options for parent-led curriculum, which again would require some different things in the home, but would offer parents the opportunity to be, once again, intimately involved with your child's curriculum and formatting. So that is definitely a benefit here. Usually, I won't say always, but usually this mode follows or kind of mimics public charter, maybe even some of the public schools' local curriculum. And it is likely very aligned with state standards, in some places even Common Core. And there are many, like I said, many options for all of these. I'll highlight just a few for the traditional. There locally here, as I said, I'm in Arizona, there are two options. One is called Primavera Online, and the other is ASU Prep Online, ASU Prep Digital. And those options are free for the families in the state of Arizona who pursue a full curriculum with either option. Clearly, they are both online, as I said, but again, that's just a resource for families. In addition, there are nationally known sort of schools and options, which one is K-12. That's, you know, easy to get some information about that. My recommendation, though, is if this is the path that you'd like to go, then definitely check within your state. See if there are some resources available to you as a new homeschool family, a new homeschool parent, that, again, is aligned with state standards. And that state standards become very, very important when we talk about college admissions in just a little bit. The next option is eclectic. Just like the name sounds, it utilizes various curriculums, various resources. In all transparency, this was the method we used for our daughter this year. We just wanted to play to her strengths, and that is really a tremendous benefit for the eclectic mode of homeschooling. So for example, for us in our experience this year, we used one curriculum that was for history and literature. It involved some additional reading of some classic novels and literary pieces, and then, you know, required her to do reading of units and chapters and answer questions in a book format. But then for her math, we used something completely different. We used an online format for this. She struggles a little bit in math and loves reading. And so we felt like using an online math where the instructor taught on each unit, and then she was able to do book work, you know, on her own. The format we used did allow for her to watch the lesson as many times as she needed to in order to get it. Again, just wanting to play to her strengths and weaknesses and provide the best support. So that is what eclectic homeschooling does offer, which is a tremendous benefit in many, many regards. The third sort of bucket, if you will, is unschooling. Again, just as the name implies, it's unconventional. Sort of the thought behind it is to undo school methodology. A lot of families who utilize or, you know, kind of follow the unschooling bucket have a lot of experiential learning. You know, let's say, for example, you are focused on biology. And so you take a family trip to the lake and you have your students hold in their hands, you know, fish. And you talk about how they're designed and how they work and how they play into the ecosystem overall and things of that nature. And so it provides a lot of hands-on experiences through that mode. With all of these, there is definitely flexibility. In some regard, I would probably say that unschooling provides, that sort of methodology provides the most flexibility for students and for families. If you go back up to the traditional option and you decide to utilize sort of a distance learning format, there will likely be required amounts of time that need to be spent on the computer within different subjects, things of that nature. And so the flexibility falls more in the line of when students do it and where students do it. Going back to the eclectic, the flexibility comes in the curriculum. There aren't a tremendous amount of regulations, you know, when you look at the eclectic mode. And so that does provide opportunities to incorporate some other types of curriculum, be it a faith-based or something like that, if that is your desire. So again, pros and cons to every option. And my, again, encouragement would be, if this is your plan, if this is something that you're interested in, that you absolutely do your own research and find out what resources and what specific curriculum would be associated with each one in order to make the best decision for you and your students. So now that we kind of have this, these buckets laid out for us in terms of homeschooling definitions, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about how to determine if homeschool is actually the right fit for your family. Ideally, you will start with asking yourself and your family, what is the purpose behind homeschooling? There could be lots of answers to this question, but being able to articulate why you are doing what you're doing, A, will guide your family as we talk about goals and decision factors, and B, will be extremely important when it comes to the college application and college admissions, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So let's say your purpose, for example, is that you are noticing that your student is quickly grasping material and concepts and is moving pretty rapidly through the curriculum. And so you want to be able to provide opportunities for that continued advancement. Then maybe that is your purpose and your reasoning for homeschool. That's totally acceptable, right? Again, this is all about what is the best fit for your family. But knowing that purpose will then drive your goals. And that is, again, important and vital when it comes to the college application and college admissions. So if your purpose is being able to support your student who is advancing quickly, then your goals will align with that. And so your goals might be, okay, we will use a specific traditional curriculum for, you know, the first 2 years or year or whatever, and then we will incorporate some community college courses, right? That would align your purpose and your goals pretty neatly. And again, doing this for your student, you might have to do this for each individual student, but this will help keep your mind focused on where your student is going. And that's going to be really important because, as many of you I'm sure are already experiencing, homeschool days can be challenging. There can be days that you question, why are we doing this? Why did we make this decision? But again, being able to draw back on your purpose and goals will make those hard days, you know, bearable, if you will. And then in determining the right fit for your family, there are decision factors. You know, curriculum obviously is a big one, but your current lifestyle, does it fit for homeschooling? Again, for our personal experience, we had to work through how we were going to homeschool and have full-time jobs. And so we just had to make some adjustments as a family to be able to pursue that path, because we felt like that was the best path for our student. And that's what we did. So again, there isn't a right or a wrong. It's just being able to think through and articulate the decisions that you're making. As mentioned before, there are pros and cons for every decision that we make. And so I think thinking through those and working through those as you prepare to make this decision will guide you, you know, in the path that is appropriate for your family. And so to start with the pros, there's a flexible schedule. That could be extremely positive for a lot of families, as opposed to the traditional brick and mortar school of, you know, starting at a certain time, ending at a certain time, lunches at a certain time. And so being able to have more control as a family over that schedule is beneficial. Again, this idea of working at letting a student work at their own pace is definitely a pro for a lot of parents and students as they look to homeschool, whether that is at a faster pace or maybe a slower pace in some subjects. Again, fitting the needs of your student is where it all begins, but that is definitely a benefit. With homeschooling, there is just ultimately more time in the day, most likely. And so that is a benefit of that is being able to work on personal growth opportunities. So that could be anything, you know, something as simple or important as time management. Being able to manage the responsibilities of working from home and, you know, whatever sort of additional chores or responsibilities a student might have at home. So being able to balance those, that might be something that as a family, you're really able to hone in and focus on during this time of homeschooling. In addition, there will be lots of time and opportunities for volunteering, athletics, maybe even part-time work. This will be something that, again, we talk about in just a few minutes as it relates to college admissions. These are very, very, very vital topics in the college admission kind of component of application. But I do want to pause here really quick and focus on athletics for just a moment. There are many opportunities for homeschool students to engage in athletics. One way is definitely club athletics. If your son or daughter is doing softball, there's softball club or things of that nature. There are also ways, or there might be ways for your student to engage with athletics at the local high school level. And so I would encourage you, if this is a path that you're leaning toward, that you and your student is an athlete, that you would research those opportunities. Again, in Arizona, our students, our homeschool students, have the opportunity to try out at the high school, the local high school, public high school that their house is zoned for. And then if they make the team, then that student would likely then be required to take usually one class at that school. Usually that class is closely associated with the sport that the student is playing, or could even be something like weightlifting. It's a PE type course. And so that is also a way that families can earn credit while homeschooling and while their son or daughter is participating in athletics. So just make sure that if that is your student, that you do your due diligence and research with your local school districts and high schools. Some cons that that definitely come up. One is flexible schedule, right? Sometimes things that are benefits can also be to our detriment. And so flexible schedules can negatively impact students. And so just being aware of that, being aware of who your student is and sort of the strengths and weaknesses that they have, and being able to play to that. The biggest con that I hear from a lot of families and friends is social interaction. You know, doing school at home doesn't allow for the occasional conversation at the locker or passing in the hallway or conversation at lunch. And so finding ways, if you have a social student, to engage with peers is really, really important, whether that is, you know, through volunteering, or even a lot of states have homeschool co-ops, which offer classes in one subject that's taught to multiple students. So that would be one way to sort of fill that void of social interaction. Another con, and something that just needs to be articulated and worked through, is family lifestyle, to see if this truly is a fit for your family. And that is something only you can answer. In addition, the final con could be assessment and growth. In a traditional brick and mortar school system, there are clearly dated and laid out assessments and for growth. And so if you choose a curriculum that has a lot more flexibility, then you might just have to work a little bit harder to see that growth or assess that growth throughout the year or years. So that's definitely something that, again, you need to work through and talk through as a family. Okay, so really, now that we sort of have the framework for homeschooling behind us, we really want to spend some time diving in and talking through how does being a homeschooler impact college admissions. And I think before we can really even determine that, we have to identify what are the top factors in college admissions. You can see them on your screen. And so we'll just go through them quickly, and then I will discuss how being a homeschool student could and has and does impact each one of these categories. So GPA and or class rank and curriculum are the top two. Curriculum rigor are the top two components of college admissions. And then SAT, ACT scores, activities and leadership, college essays, letters of recommendation, and ability to pay. So we're going to start actually at the end of the list and then work our way up. Again, so that we can spend a bulk of our time sort of talking about GPA and things like that. So one thing to note, it's extremely important, a homeschool student, when applying to college, does not have a separate application. There's one application for every college, whether that is through the Common App, whether that is through a proprietary, software program on the school website, whatever it is, there's only one. You will be asked how you've been educated, and then that would be your opportunity to say you've been homeschooled. So with that, the ability to pay is evaluated the exact same as other students. There's no additional requirement or information that's needed. Whatever is required of a traditionally schooled student would be required of a homeschool student. The college essay. This is a really, really important component of your college admissions application, regardless of how you were educated, whether you were home educated or whether you were educated at a brick and mortar. But it's important because it offers an opportunity for students to clearly articulate and communicate who they are. And this is important, again, no matter where you've been educated. It is the first opportunity for the college admission team to actually hear your voice, the voice of the student. And that is vital, right, to college admissions and all of that, being able to set yourself apart, students from other students, right? I will say that homeschool students who find themselves in this situation definitely need to make sure that they are prepared to answer the question as to why you were homeschooled. Why was that decision made, and why was that the best decision for the student and for the family? Again, this ties back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of your purpose and your goals, and clearly articulating that with your family will allow your student to easily share their heart and sort of their background in a college essay as they try to differentiate themselves from the other students in the pool for that year. In addition to being able to answer why homeschooling, students should be able to articulate how their day was structured. This doesn't mean you have to give a schedule of your day, saying that at 8 a.m. started with making your bed, 8:30 breakfast, 9 a.m. was math, right? That's not what they're looking for. They just be prepared to articulate roughly about how many hours you spent on a particular subject in a given day. These are important tangibles for the college admission team to be able to, again, differentiate and even solidify your education. There'll be many other ways, as we'll talk about, but again, this is really, really important in giving the college admission team a view, a window into your high school experiences. The next area is letters of recommendation. For traditionally educated students, letters of recommendation usually come from 2 teachers and a guidance counselor. Usually it's a humanities teacher, and then usually a STEM teacher, and then, like I said, the guidance counselor. For students who are home educated, on the other hand, there is likely not one teacher for each subject, right? And so this would be the only opportunity that a university would accept a letter of recommendation from a parent. Even then, though, that is not my first recommendation in terms of who should write a letter for a student, only because it's challenging to, for some parents, not all, it is challenging to separate your biases for your student, either good or bad, and then be able to articulate that in a letter. So it is recommended that families and students use mentors, coaches. Maybe your student was able to make a connection with a community leader through some volunteer work, or church leader, or just whomever. Maybe even if you pursued a co-op sort of format at some point, getting a letter of recommendation from that co-op lead teacher would give the college admission committee insight to how your student learns in a classroom setting. This is something that's very important for college admission personnel to know and to be informed about as they make decisions to see if your student would be a good fit at their university. So that is just definitely something to think about and to consider. Again, this goes back to your purpose, your goals, and the decisions that you need to kind of think through as you look to homeschool. The next portion is SAT or ACT scores. I know with COVID and Corona, the whole standardized testing world has been flipped upside down. And so colleges recognize that, and that impacts even students who have been homeschooled. So I'll just give you a little bit of pre-coronavirus ideas of how college admission teams kind of sort through this. So typically a homeschool student would be asked to submit SAT 2 or subject test scores, even if they took a standardized test. The SAT 2 are the subject tests, and usually a college would ask for this in a math subject, likely a science subject, and maybe a humanities, like a foreign language option. This is important to note because even if a school is test optional, they may still require an SAT 2 for homeschooled students. So again, this isn't to deter you, it's just to inform you so that you can make the best decision. Now I know I said a little bit of a buzzword there with test optional. I'm not going to spend time during this webinar going through that. However, if that is something that you're curious about or need more information on, please check out our website. There is a webinar on test optional that Ibrahim Firat did, our chief consultant. That was fantastic. And so it would answer a lot of questions that sort of surround the idea of test optional, test blind, and so on. We just don't have time today to dive into that too deeply. The next area is activities, right? Again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, maximizing your opportunities, your students' opportunities to engage in athletics, performing arts, you know, voice lessons, whatever it might be that they are interested in. Because in addition to the two sort of the essay ideas that I mentioned that students need to be prepared to write about, all students are asked the question, what extracurricular activities are you most passionate about? If your child has spent their entire homeschool educated life just doing book work, they don't have any activities to articulate or to mention when that's asked. This is the same advice for students who are educated traditionally. We encourage students, don't just go to school and do your work, engage in your local community, engage in your school community. For home educated students, those two communities are the same. And so pursuing leadership opportunities and activities that speak to the interests of your student will again increase their opportunities to discuss this in a college application. Again, always looking for ways to be able to differentiate your student from others, you know, during that application season. Okay, the last section that we're going to talk about, it's probably one of the most important and likely one of the most challenging for home educated families. That is GPA and curriculum rigor. In the initial slide that you guys saw, these were two separate components. For home educated, I combined them. One, because there is no class rank for home educated students, and two, because these two are very tightly knit. There isn't a good way as a home educated student or family to separate these two, nor should you. For the GPA and the curriculum rigor, this will both be revealed in a transcript. Yes, even as a home educated student, it is vital that you have a transcript to submit to a college or university during the application season. The transcript must include a GPA, which means that the classes must include a letter grade, and likely some sort of weight associated with it. In order to create the most honest transcript, it is imperative that families keep good records of grades from day one of homeschooling. Now, let me be clear, this is not school at home this year. This would be if you are pursuing homeschooling next year. It would be ideal to, or just imperative to keep tight records of what your student is doing. Does that mean you need to keep every single assignment or lesson that your child has done? No, but it does mean you should track it in some way. For example, there are free resources, free software programs out there that you can utilize. You can even utilize Excel or Google Sheets or whatever makes sense. There isn't a lot of regulation around this. This is primarily so that when and or if a student is asked to provide more information about their records or their grades, they're able to do so quite quickly. It's very challenging to get to a senior year and then have to track back all of the grades throughout all of high school, even if you started as a junior. And so again, maintaining records from the first day will relieve any of the stress sort of in the end. In addition to that, record the curriculum. So if you are using an online platform, as I mentioned earlier, locally, ASU Prep Digital will likely track all of that for you. However, if you are using the eclectic mode and sort of piecemealing the curriculum together for your student, you would want to keep track of every book that you used, every online program that you used, whatever literature books your student might have read. Just keep all of that recorded so that you can once again provide the resources and the information if asked. And sort of in addition to that, simultaneously, it's recommended and ideal to maintain course descriptions. Again, if you're using a distance learning or online format, that should be provided to you or for you. But if you're using unschooling or eclectic, then you will need to create that. And it doesn't have to, be 4 pages long. It can be a simple paragraph in terms of the goals for the course, what was covered in the course, sort of the main ideas that were taught through that course, okay? These are all really, really important components and in preparation for the college admissions cycle and the application. It feels tedious, it seems tedious, but again, doing it from day one and sort of as you're going along will prevent any frustration or missed information even at the end when students are actually applying. Another recommendation to provide rigor for your students, especially for those students who, like I mentioned earlier, were just advanced and kind of go through the curriculum pretty quickly. I strongly recommend utilizing community college for college level classes, even in high school. So traditional high school students do have the opportunity to have dual enrollment classes. And so that is what would be comparable to this for a traditional student or for a homeschool student, is utilizing community college to finish out high school. Benefits there is that A, students are earning college credit while attending high school, while finishing up high school, and B, those credits will likely be able to be transferred to the university of your student's choice. Not to mention, students will receive a transcript from that college in the end that you can then provide to the university. And so that's extremely beneficial. And it doesn't have to be only for advanced students, but it is helpful for those students who are advanced. So that's really all of this, the information of how homeschooling is different and applies to the college admissions process. There are a lot more detailed instructions or steps for each one of those categories. But again, just wanted to make sure that families are aware of the broad idea behind homeschooling, the impacts of homeschooling on your college admissions. So let's say you've heard this and you've decided that this is a great opportunity and the ideal way that you want to educate your students moving forward. Then here are just some recommendations for next steps. The first one is probably the most important, and that is to research state regulations. This I kind of pare down into two different categories. The first one, again, is probably the most important, and that is regarding high school graduation requirements. Make sure that you are aware of what your state requires in terms of stamping your student as completing high school. For example, is that, make sure that you have 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of lab science, 3 years of social science, right? So whatever that looks like for your state, you need to be aware of. In addition to that, it's imperative that you know that information and connect it to the college that your student is applying to. Typically, not always, but typically, graduation requirements meet minimum college admission requirements. However, if your student is looking into or interested in applying to a selective or highly selective university, then the minimum will never be enough, right? So we want to make sure that students are aware of where they want to go, what is required in their state, so that you can clearly achieve the goals that you have for your student. Again, I tie that back to the purpose and goals that we talked about a little bit earlier. Your purpose and your goals will drive or be the foundation in which you and your students set your homeschooling model and accomplishments on. And so making sure that those are clear and that they align smoothly with state regulations is very, very important. Secondly, when I talk about state regulations and researching that, I'm referring to understanding how your state views and supports the home educated community. Every state has their own regulations, and so being familiar with and understanding that will, again, help set your student on the right path and right trajectory for getting to their next desired step, college, or even a career, if they decide that college isn't their next plan. But still, you students need to make sure that they are completing high school. The next step after that would be, again, just deciding as a family if homeschooling is the best fit. For some families, it's very easy to answer. For others, it's not so easy. It might require some sacrifices or, making some adjustments to the family dynamic. And that's okay. You just have to have those conversations ahead of time. There will always be a few surprises here and there when you're homeschooling, but being the best prepared that you can will allow for the nuances within the education. And then from there, you would definitely want to start thinking through and working through curriculum or resources that are available to your student and to your family, and then just make some decisions on that. I will say that depending on the grade level of your student, that feeling like you have to pick one curriculum and stick to it doesn't always work. Again, because if you're doing homeschooling for the first time, you might pick a curriculum that looks fantastic, everything is laid out, and then your student gets into it and finds that it's just a challenge to navigate. Maybe it's math, right? That's kind of the big one. And the way that the questions are asked or the lessons are taught doesn't actually speak to, excuse me, your student's strengths. So if that's the case and you have a younger high school student or even a middle school student, it would be beneficial and helpful then to switch it. And you're allowed to do that, right? Homeschooling doesn't look the same from home to home or family to family. And so again, adjusting your curriculum to fit the needs of your students is the best way to approach it. And then ideally picking a starting date. I know that might be hard for some of us right now, just given the reality of the unknown of the future and of when schools will reopen. Even an estimated starting date will provide some structure and some stability if you decide that this is the right path for you. There are a lot more steps, but I didn't want to overwhelm families, and so just wanted to start with these as being the top 4 steps in kind of pursuing homeschooling. And then here we have resources, again, without wanting to overwhelm anyone, and we can definitely share this with the participants after the webinar. They're all available. So these resources have been beneficial just for families I know and for just my own experience. The first website is called The Best Schools. Has fantastic resources in terms of college-friendly or homeschool-friendly colleges. And, you know, as I defined earlier, those 3 buckets of homeschooling, this website goes into detail, far much greater detail on the different types of homeschooling that are out there. And so that would be a great first resource as you are kind of determining curriculum and format and resources. This website is fantastic. Secondly, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association is a magnificent website for those who are looking to home educate. On here actually is a template for a high school transcript, which is fantastic and is widely used and accepted at colleges across the country. But also it links to information on specific state regulations. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the things parents and families should do if they're considering this path is to research your state regulations. So this website would be a fantastic first place to visit, as well as the Department of Education for your state. Whatever state that is, it would be extremely beneficial for you to do some research there. And then the final resource that I found to be helpful is just the link to MIT's acceptance of home educated students. I picked this one primarily because MIT is one of the most challenging schools to get into in our country, and they accept homeschooled students. And so your student does not have to, if they're homeschooled, they do not have to take out the highly selective or selective universities from their list just because they're home educated. While many schools, universities have a very small homeschool population, just in relation to their overall population, many schools accept them. So you don't have to diminish your student and their list just because they are a home educated student. And so just wanting to encourage you guys to reach out if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you need a little bit of help guiding, getting some resources and information, happy to share, happy to talk through that with you guys. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. The question was definitely, or the idea behind this was definitely to focus on encouraging and helping families work through this. And so hopefully this has been helpful. We will now open it up to Q&A for the last few minutes to see if there are any questions regarding home education and homeschooling. Okay, well, we will leave it open for just a little bit longer to see if there are any. Guys, I just want to thank you and really appreciate you joining us today as families work through and think through being home educated. So good luck out there. If you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to reach out. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye-bye.